Hey everybody. Today we're talking about Quarto, the next generation of our Markdown from Posit, the company that makes our studio. This is a really powerful piece of software that allows us to create PDFs, HTML, Word documents, slides in various formats using formatted text as well as code from R, Python, and other languages. I'm going to show you all of those things, as well as a little bit about publishing your stuff when you're actually done and getting it up onto the web. One thing I really like about Quarto is how user-friendly it is and how easy it is to just kind of hit the ground running with it, especially if you have some experience with R Markdown, but really even if you don't. I am an R user, that's my native tongue, so I'm working in R Studio. But Quarto can be used through either through the command line directly or through things like VS Code. I'm just not getting into that. So I'm going to get a new Quarto document here, and we'll get a new pop-up window just like we would with a new Markdown. And let's give it a title. How about Quarto Demo? I'm going to leave out the author for the moment. HTML is a nice general format to start with, but you can easily pick one of the others. I'll talk a little bit about each of those in a bit, as well as the engine. Then I'm going to go to Create. And if you've used Markdown before, this is going to look slightly familiar. You are going to have three things going on here, basically. You're going to have a header, a YAML header, yet another Markdown language. That's going to let you put some metadata about the document as well as some global options. Again, I'll talk about that in a little bit. You're going to have some formatted code here. You can see headings, links, boldface, and so on. And then you're going to have code chunks. And in this case, it's R code, but could easily be Python. And again, I'll show you a little bit of that later. So there's two views here. The visual is the default, and this is kind of like almost like a little bit reminiscent of Microsoft Word, where you have drop-down menus for things you can do. But sometimes it may be easier to actually work in the source, which is going to look fundamentally like a Markdown document. And you can see your sort of Markdown syntax. Two stars on either side of your boldface. Let's see here. Let's add a few things. We can do italics with single stars. We could do bulleted lists. So hyphen, first, second, and so on. And we can do many other things. I won't go through all of it. Now, if you are working with this sort of Markdown code, I will point out there's a cheat sheet here. If you go up to the Help menu and Cheat Sheets, you can go to the R Markdown cheat sheet. If you're pretty good with R Markdown already, like I am, it gets natural to type links in like this and lists and italics and so on. But for things you're not familiar with, the visual editor can be really nice. First of all, instead of star, italics, star, you can actually see the italics font, and you can see the actual bulleted list. One thing that I particularly like doing from this menu is to insert tables, or from this view, I mean, or insert rather figures. And so I'm going to insert an image. I am going to use this rusty logo.png file that you'll see in some of my thumbnails and stuff. And I'm going to specify that contrary to my default settings, I want this aligned left. The default settings are to align it in the center. Let's see here. How about we just do a caption that says my logo, and my logo is a chi-squared distribution with, I don't know, how about I say rusty colors? And there's other things you can do with this, but I'll just get that in there. And there it is. You can see the caption and everything. Now, flipping back and forth between visual and source can be a good learning tool. For instance, here I can see the Markdown syntax for what I just did. That's nice. Going back to visual, though, you can just resize this with a drag. You can get the other options by clicking on that sort of ellipsis right there. So I think that's a very nice thing. Let's see here. I think it's time to talk about some code. Again, I'm more comfortable with the source editor, so I'm going to stick with that. All right, so you can embed code chunks like this. The one they give us isn't very interesting, so I'm going to go back and change that. The first line of code I often put in my documents is library tidyverse, so let's do that. Just like with a script or with a Markdown file, you can do Command Enter from within your Quarto documents to actually execute your things in the console. So I'll go ahead and do that. And let's see how this looks when we render it. I guess we haven't rendered this yet, have we? Let's go ahead and do that. Render is similar to knit when you're doing our Markdown. It's going to prompt me to save this because although I've given my document a title that shows up at the top, I haven't actually named the file. So I'll give it a similar name. How about Quarto demo? And I'll save that, and then it will knit for me, and it should pull this up in an HTML file. There it is, and I'll zoom it in a little bit more. You can see everything formatted. You can see my image with the sizing that I asked for, along with the caption that goes at the bottom. And then you can see my code. Let's see here. One thing that isn't so great about this is it's getting kind of noisy, right? Like you've got library tidyverse. If this is a professional document that I'm supposed to be giving to people, I might not want all of this stuff at the bottom. So let's put in an option or two here. Now, if you are familiar with Markdown, you're used to putting options inside of here, and that's fine. That will still work. Quarto, they've moved away from that for a lot of different reasons. The main one being uniformity from so that we're not specifically doing things that Knitter is going to be looking for, the engine that's driving the R code from within our studio. If we were going to try and create a document using a Jupyter notebook, for instance, then that syntax wouldn't be natural. So RStudio, posit that is, has moved to this hash pipe notation for options. So we'll go ahead and use that. And I think what I want here is, let's see, how about output? And I want that to be false. So let's see how that looks when I render it. There it is. So now I'm just seeing library tidyverse. There are lots of other options that you can use. For instance, you can also check out echo, include, error. There's a whole list of them that let you customize how much of what the user has written, the reader sees. Now, as long as we're in the thinking about these chunk options, let's go ahead and add a label. And let's call this thing load packages. So this is nice for a lot of reasons. The first one that we see is if we go down here to this sort of outline that we have at the bottom, now the chunk has a name, load packages. So it makes it easier if you're writing a longer document to kind of jump around and know where you are. By the way, you have an outline button here that you can hit. See the general outline with these headers. So that can be nice. We can do lots of other things. Let's include a plot. We've already loaded up tidyverse. Oh, did you see how I clicked the C button? That's for code, so you can include different sorts of code. I'm going to stick with R for a little bit. I'm going to do a ggplot from the diamond set, and I just want a bar chart for the cut variable. So let's do that. And let's put a label on here with the hash and the vertical bar, which again, Posit is calling a hash pipe. So label, when you're doing a figure, it's nice to have this fig dash syntax for your names. So how about fig dash diamonds? And the reason is that makes cross-referencing easier. I'll show you that in just a second here. Let's go ahead and render that and see how it looks. So there it is. All right, now I don't have a caption on here, so we can put that on here. So how about a fig.cap? A bar chart of diamond cuts. While we're at it, let's go ahead and put some alt text on here. If we want to give something that's a little more descriptive for a screen reader, for low vision or no vision individuals that might be looking or digesting our report. So for fig.alt, I'll just write more descriptive stuff here. And if things get really long, by the way, and you want to start a new line, you can do this vertical bar and then oops, and then enter. And I usually indent that a little bit just for neatness. Let's see how this looks now when we render it. So visually it looks the same, but now if we right click on this and look at our inspect our accessibility properties, we'll get some more information. So you can see more descriptive stuff here under the description of the image. Now I'm using Firefox, and so the right clicking goes to inspect accessibility properties, but if you're on Chrome or something else, the options are almost identical. So that's nice. Many other options we could do here. How about out dot, oh, I don't want to indent that. How about out dot width? So sort of by default, the figure is going kind of to the full width of my column. So I'm going to do an output width of, say, 50% and render that. And for some purposes, this might be nicer, depending on exactly what you're trying to do. Let's see here. Another option I think I'll show you is code fold. Let's see what happens when I do code fold. All right. And it didn't happen this time. I don't quite know why. No. Oh, code cold. You've actually got to do code fold. As always, typos will mess things up. Okay, so what's happened here is that we've got the output of the code, and then by default, there's just a hidden clickable thing with the actual code behind it. And so this is communicating to users that the output is the most important thing, but if they want to dive in a little bit deeper, they can actually see what happened there. So that's wonderful. Let's go ahead and refer to this figure in the text. So the syntax is pretty simple. It's just an at symbol. And then you put the thing that you have as your label. So fig dash diamonds in this case. And let's render that and see how it looks. It'll automatically insert fig 1. You can see that right there. And it'll even be clickable in my HTML. ggplot outputs are not the only thing that you can refer to in this way. Of course, you can also refer to just images that you've inserted. I could have labeled this thing. There's many other options. Now, let's see here. Before we go any further, I want to show you this gear right here that lets you choose some different options for how things are previewed and shown. So first of all, you can swap back and forth to the visual editor here. Now, I want to notice that the default for me is preview in viewer, but if you'd like to get your preview in a viewer, or preview in window rather, is my default. But if I'd rather see preview in the viewer pane, I can tick that. And now when I render it, I won't have to open up my browser. It'll be right here. Now, right now I'm kind of zoomed in to increase your visibility. So this isn't necessarily the best for my demonstration purposes. So I'm going to undo that option right now and preview in window from now on. But a lot of times it's nice to have that preview right next to what you're actually writing. Also notice you have options for previewing images and equations and showing previews inline versus not. Chunk options inline versus in console. So for instance, if I change that option and then go and do this plot, when I hit Command Enter, instead of showing it in my usual plots pane in RStudio, now it's actually putting it inline. That's largely a matter of preference, just where you like to see things. Let's see here. Swapping back to the visual editor for just a second. All right. So one of the great things about Quarto is that you can change formats very easily. So I've been working with HTML from the start, but we can easily swap to something else. So the first thing I'm going to do is PDF. And if I click render, I'm going to get just a nice PDF output here. I'll go ahead and do that. Takes just a second now. And I have it set to, by default, open this up in my browser window as well. So it will still open up in Firefox. It'll just look a little bit different. There we go. A little bit different, but not very. Now, if you've just started using Quarto, this might not necessarily work for you. And the reason is that to render PDF output using Quarto, you need an installation of LaTeX somehow. And LaTeX is just technical typesetting software for mathematical things. If you don't have this installed, or if you're not sure it's installed, or if it doesn't seem to be installed correctly because you're not rendering PDFs correctly, you go to terminal, and this is just a shell with a working directory that's probably set a little bit different than where it might be if you open it up directly from your Finder. And the command you want is Quarto install tinytech. And so this is all one line. Maybe I'll resize my window here so that it doesn't cut off it quite so in such an unclear way. And when you execute this, it'll download and install an instance of LaTeX onto your machine. And so then your PDF should render. Okay, great. Well, as long as I've installed LaTeX on here, let's actually put in a little LaTeX. I'll start a new heading. And this is not a whole vid on LaTeX, so I'm not going to do too much, but I'll show you the very, very basics really quickly. We can how about formulas? Let's say that. Inline, like this. So basically when you're using LaTeX, you do a $ to put you into math mode. Then most symbols start with a slash. Maybe all symbols start with a slash. So if I want an alpha, it's that slash with alpha. And then I close up math mode like that. And you see you've got a little preview. We indent like this. And so to have indented math, if you need to have like full equations or things that need to be longer, you use $2. So here, for instance, we might want to do, I don't know, pi is in the real numbers. So math BB of R. Let's see how that looks. I owe you a vid on doing LaTeX for our users. I'll get to that eventually, but I think this is enough to get you started. Fundamentally, if you need to make a symbol or a nice looking equation or stack symbols on top of each other, stuff like that, you Google it. There's lots of good documentation on LaTeX, or LaTeX as some people will pronounce it. So again, Google for more info and specific symbols. Hugely powerful, hugely useful. Great. Let's do some slides. Here we're supposed to be doing different formats, so I want to do some slides next. By the way, you can do Word. There's many other different formats you can put in here. I'm going to immediately switch over to get slides with Reveal.js. Okay. And one really nice thing about this is when you swap formats, you just go over and click render, and things tend to work. Occasionally the options that you use for one format or another might be a little bit different, but generally things act in a logical way. So there's my title, Quarto Demo, and I'll just arrow forward. My next slide is called Quarto. And if you look back at the code, that's this header right here. My next header was called Running Code. So if I go back to my slides, there's running code. Now, one difference is visible right here. You can embed code like this in my HTML file. We saw a library tidyverse, and that's not the case here. The defaults for the Reveal.js are sometimes very slightly different, and for me, this is the most noticeable one. So in this case, I am going to want to put a chunk option for this. I think I want echo is true. Let's see if that's coming out the way I want it. There it is. Great. And we can do a lot of the same things that we can with our HTML or our PDF here. All right, so that's looking good. I'm also owing you an entire presentation on making good slides with Quarto. This is really just scratching the surface. You'll notice that the formatting here isn't particularly interesting. It's all just kind of like black and white. I would love to have some backgrounds on here. I'd like to personalize this in any number of ways. Okay, let's talk about this header a little bit more. we've got all sorts of ways we can personalize this. And before I start doing anything else, I just want to let you know that there's some really good autofill here. So first of all, you can just start typing. So like once you get a few letters in, it'll pull up your options. So if I type 4, it'll suggest format and format links. But even if you don't have anything in mind, you can hit Command, or rather Control, space. And that'll just bring up all of your possibilities there. So you don't even need to start typing to get that. So this is something nice that RStudio does for you. And we can add now a lot of metadata. So let's get in an author. I'm Andrew Gard. And let's get a date. And how about I put in today's date? It's 25 January 2024. And the date sort of meta listing here, or the field here, is very forgiving. It will accept many different formats. And then when I render it and it will show up in sort of the standardized year, month, day format. So that's kind of nice. Just a good example of something that just kind of tends to work. The next thing I want to show you is that we can put in options for your format, more additional options for your formatting here. I think for the moment, I'm going to go back to HTML. And because things are going to get a little bit more complicated, I'm going to put a colon and start indenting this. So I'm going to put options in for my HTML file. First of all, you can put you put different overall themes. So I'm going to do Lux just because it tends to look a little bit different. I need a space there. It looks distinctive from that default theme that we already have. It's not that I particularly love Lux, but you can see that here the font has changed. And that's nice. If you Google for the different Quarto themes that are available for HTML or Reveal.js, you can see them. Here's I did exactly that, and you can see that for the HTMLs, you've got a whole lot of different themes here. So for instance, there's a dark theme and so on. Great. Another option that I like to show you that I'd like to show you that I think is really nice when you're doing HTML stuff in particular is TOC, which stands for Table of Contents. And so when we render this, we're going to get a nice little sidebar here in the actual document. Show you that right there, Table of Contents. And it's clickable. And if you've ever read an R book, it's likely that you saw something that looked kind of like this, like if you were reading R4DS or something. I think that's pretty cool. All of this can be personalized, by the way. You can change the label here on your table of contents, for instance, with I think it's TOC-title. Yep. So let's put in something different. How about it's my thing? There we go. Take a look at that. It's my thing right there. So again, there's just a whole lot to explore here, which I think is wonderful. We can set some global options here. So for instance, we could say that we want our figs to always be aligned on the left, for instance. And I won't actually render that right now. Another thing that I really like is that we can have things output to more than one format at once. So let's also put in a PDF. And we could put in a PDF output. And we can put in lots of different options here. So for instance, like, well, I could put whatever here, fig line or whatever. I think though, for the moment, I just want default. And you actually need to let Quarto know that you don't want other options here, that you're just going with all the default options for PDF. Now, when I click render, I'm still going to just get the HTML. It's going to default to sort of the first one here. So that's still the HTML. But now by my render button, I have options, and I can also render it as a PDF. It's possible to render them all at once, for instance, using the terminal window. I haven't had a use case for that yet, but maybe you have. Let's see here. The next thing I want to show you. You can also set sort of global options for these chunks. So I said I wanted this load packages chunk to use an echo true and an output false, I can set those globally. So here I'm going to add an execute option. And this is just letting Quarto know specifically I'm setting global options for all of my execution chunks. And there aren't actually that many options here, but you can see there are things like echo true. And I'll just render right now to make sure it's still running. And it is. So no errors. That's nice. Okay. The next thing I want to do is to show you just a tiny little bit of getting Python in here. I'm not in this vid really trying to teach Python and Quarto, but I just want to give you a little bit of a heads up on how to do it. Now, assuming you're wanting a document that has both R and Quart and Python, you'll need to have the reticulate package installed. So it's install.packages parenthesis quote reticulate. I won't execute that because I already have that. Now, notice that I'm putting that in the console. Interactive commands like install.packages or view, for instance, always go in the console, never in a Quarto document. Help files is another one, question mark, ggplot or something. All right, so now let's get a new code chunk, but instead of R, we're going to just label it Python. Simple enough. And let's just put some code here that we wouldn't do in R. So xy is 4, 7. And that should render just fine. You can see that worked out just fine. If I had tried to execute that code in R, for instance, I would have got an error. If I hit Command Enter, however, it'll automatically pull up this, it'll automatically execute this command with the reticulate package, recognizing that this is a Python chunk. So I think that's kind of nice. Obviously, there's much more sophisticated things you can do here. Actually, you know what? I should put in a new header here. So one thing that you might want to do, though, is to take a data set, for instance, that you've been working on using R code and then have it available in your Python chunks. And by default, that won't happen. So for instance, if I do print empty cars, which is a built-in R data set, try and render it, I'm going to get an error here because Python doesn't know what that empty cars set is. So in order to get a data set recognized by Python, we have to use R dot. So I'm going to assign this empty cars in the Python environment to be, how about empty cars underscore pi? And I'm going to get it in there using the following syntax. And this is probably the most important thing you need to know if you're working with R and Python. It's R dot, and then the name of the set that you've been working with in R. And then if I do a print of empty cars underscore pi, certainly this won't be the nicest render, but it should actually render. So let's take a look at this. There it is. I actually got a Python looking printout. So that's nice. We can then go back to R, of course. And to do this, we need to say, how about empty cars new? And we'll use our good old R assignment operator. Now, I can't just do empty cars underscore pi. That won't be found for the same reason that empty cars wasn't found by Python up here. I'll just hit render and you'll see the error. There it is. So the syntax we're going to need now is pi dollar. And I believe I'm still going to get an error here. Double check that. Yeah. And the reason is to go back in the opposite direction to have our code recognize the Python set. You have to explicitly call or load the reticulate package. So there we go. Now this should work. And before I show you the rendered version, let's do the head of empty cars. And let's actually make it look nice by doing a GT. So I'll do library GT. And when I do the head of empty cars new, I'll pipe that into GT. Great tables, good tables, one of those. Nice way to do tables. Oops, I have an execution error. So what did I do wrong here? Oh, head needs an A. When I was first learning to code, I was walking through all my errors and showing them to the person that was helping me learn it. They said to me, it's always a syntax error. And I think that's slight exaggeration, but only a slight one. So there you can see a nice version of the top of the MT cars data set, where here we've passed it to Python and then back. So, if like me, you're really tied to ggplot, you can do your graphics in ggplot, but do some of your ML in Python, for instance. Okay, so that's the main stuff I really wanted to show. I think the cherry on top is just publishing this. So there's this little button at the top here, and this is going to be our publish button. And there's different options. I'm going to use RPubs. It is a free service from RStudio, from Posit there. I guess they haven't updated that, for sharing documents to the web. And once you hit publish, it's going to then take you to that website, and you're going to have the opportunity to log in and then set some options for the title and exact website, and then be able to see this. Um, so this is a very easy and free way to share documents with other people that you might be needing to see this. Okay, so I will have more videos on Quarto to come, but hopefully this is enough to really get you hitting the ground running with it.